We have lots to talk about in today's video, including the latest trade rumors around the NHL. Today's rumor mill focusing on teams like the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Colorado Avalanche, the LA Kings, Boston Bruins, as well as the Canucks and Elias Pettersson, connected to a couple more different teams. Plus, we have more news from the NHL waiver wire, including a claim Brandon Saad's already found himself a new home. We have significant news on the NHL salary cap, plus a lot of injury updates around the league. A lot more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss here today. Let's start first with some news again from the NHL waiver wire. It's been a busy week of waiver activity, and that was not different here today. Of course, we had Adam Boqvist of the Florida Panthers on waivers yesterday, and he was indeed claimed. He's now a New York Islander. Boqvist will be the third new defenseman that they've picked up here in the past week or two after trading for Blues defenseman Scott Perunovich and signing Tony DeAngelo as a UFA who returned after a stint in the KHL. So the Islanders are certainly battling a lot of injuries and are trying to I guess you could say kind of retool a little bit here on the fly as they not only battle injuries but are find themselves in a winning streak and suddenly back into the thick of things on the Eastern Conference wildcard chase. So we'll see. Now, of course, after picking up Boqvist, the Islanders did reassign Isaiah George, a young defenseman, heading back to the American Hockey League after what I thought was a pretty successful run in the NHL. I'm not really sure he deserves to go down, but it's the easy move to make the roster space. I know some fans are happy, some fans are not. Would you rather have George playing, or would you rather give Boqvist a chance to see what he can do? We'll find out how things work out for them in either way. We also had other activity from the waiver wire today. We also had the Washington Capitals placing prospect Hardy Haman Akhtel on unconditional waivers for the purpose of contract termination. So he'll be released after he clears tomorrow. And we also seen as well Brandon Saad, who was unconditional waivers. No surprise, he's cleared, became a UFA. And his UFA status lasted all of about a couple minutes when he became the next member of the Vegas Golden Knights. There was no messing around. He was going to be a hot commodity this afternoon. We knew that with about 7 or 8 teams at least trying to talk and get a interest on what a contract would look like. And he signed with Vegas on a 1-year deal for the rest of the season with a prorated amount of $1.5 million. It was pretty obvious after what we learned in the last couple of days that he wasn't necessarily signing for league minimum. I think he was going to be fairly cheap for what he brings, but not that cheap. I mean, obviously he gave up almost $5 million in actual cash. He's going to be trying to make that back and obviously, have better production to justify a new contract. So going to a top contender like Vegas will do a couple of things. One is that he earned some of that money back. Hopefully he can contribute and have a better finish to his season, and obviously he wants to contribute in playoffs. Being a playoff performer, which he's been in the past, is something that will be a huge help for him to get his next contract, whether that's in Vegas or somewhere else remains to be seen. So we'll find out as things go. But Brandon Saad's the next newest member of Vegas, and it seems like just about everybody that goes there seems to do well. So we'll see if that trend continues. We also got word on some other injury updates here today. The Utah Hockey Club are going to be without Logan Cooley at the very least until after the Four Nation break. Cooley suffered a lower body injury, and they're classifying him out indefinitely right now, and he's going to be reevaluated after the Four Nation tournament. So at the very least, he'll be out till the end of February, but hard to say how much longer. Kind of depends on how things go during the break and how much recovery he can do. The Maple Leafs today returned youngster Jacob Quillen back to the American Hockey League. The Seattle Kraken announced Yanni Gourde had sports hernia surgery this morning and is going to be out of action for approximately 5 to 7 weeks, which likely puts him out if he takes the full time. That's projected here to be right around or after the trade deadline. So we know Yanni Gourde's name has been out there as a pretty hot topic in the rumor mill for somebody who's a pending unrestricted free agent, and it was a very likely player that was going to be dealt, and somebody who a lot of teams are looking at for that bottom 6 center help going into the playoffs. He's a crafty veteran. He's got a lot of experience, especially from his time with the Tampa Bay Lightning. And, that could come very valuable to a lot of other teams. We weren't really sure exactly what the price tag was going to be or where he was going to end up. But now I would think teams will be a little bit leery of trading for him without seeing him play. before the deadline, if indeed things go that way, but it's going to hurt his value for sure. I think that the Kraken, if they're going to move him, probably won't get quite as much because, like I said, because he's going to miss so much time that teams might be a little bit leery on the acquisition because of the injury. We'll see. The Nashville Predators today also confirming UC Saros is not going to be in the lineup tonight. He suffered some sort of injury and is considered day-to-day. They also activated Luke Evangelista, and in Saros' absence have recalled goaltender Matt Murray. Tonight's also going to be the Buffalo Sabres honoring longtime Sabre Rob Ray. He's going to be inducted into the team's Hall of Fame tonight. So if you're a Sabres fan or if you were a longtime hockey fan, you would remember Rob Ray. He's certainly one of the hard workers, somebody who put in a lot of nights dropping the gloves and fighting his way to stay in the NHL. So longtime Sabre going to be honored this evening. Certainly well-deserved. As I mentioned, we also got some significant news today regarding the future of the NHL salary cap, not only for the upcoming year, but the next couple years. Now, the last reports we had heard in the last few days from NHL insiders indicated that it was quite likely we were going to hear about this probably around the beginning of the Four Nation tournament. I suspect, as usual, any kind of big event like that, you usually have a press conference from Gary Bettman and Bill Daly to kick off the event, and usually they'll go over league business or talk about anything significant that's coming up. And well, that's when we kind of expected to get that salary cap news, but we actually ended up getting a joint announcement today between the NHL and the NHLPA. Put out the projection for next year and the next 2 seasons beyond that for what the cap is going to be looking like, which is significant. Of course, keep in mind, if we would not have had the pandemic and we wouldn't have had all those seasons now of either no increases or just $1 million, we would have been up around $110 million cap by now. But that unfortunately did not happen. The pandemic set things back several years, which obviously, several increases, which is why we're only at 88 right now. So as we stand for this season, the 24-25 campaign, we have an $88 million salary cap. Next year for 25-26, that's expected to go to 95.5. We had heard 96, so it's pretty close. So that's an increase of $7.5 million. So obviously that's a big jump for next year. That's certainly going to impact a lot of players that are looking for new contracts next year. I mean, you got, Mitch Marner's a pending UFA, Mikko Rantanen's a pending UFA, Connor McDavid's going to be looking for an extension. So certainly lots of big names out there that are going to benefit from the bump here. And not only that bump, but the next 2 years beyond that. So we're going to get a $7.5 million increase going into next year. After that, for 26-27, it's projected to go up another $8.5 million on top of that to $104 million. And then in 27-28, we're going to get another big jump of $9.5 million from 104 all the way up to 113.5. So essentially the next 3 seasons, we're going to see $7.5 million increase, $8.5 million increase, and $9.5 million increase. So that's significant. Obviously, that's going to create a lot of money in the system for top players. I know there is some concern of wondering how the Canadian teams will react. Obviously, because of the state of the Canadian dollar right now, that does put a lot of pressure on them. If they're going to spend to the cap, when it gets to like $113 million, if the dollar is in the same area in 2 years' time as it is now, that would put that up around 160 some million. So, I mean, it's significantly different, right? Obviously, teams like the Leafs and the Habs and the Oilers even, they won't be affected. I think more likely of teams like Winnipeg and Ottawa, the smaller markets that don't have that, as big of a revenue source as the big markets that, could be impacted for sure. Doesn't mean that they're going to be at risk to move or anything, but it does mean that, it's possible. And it's not just the Canadian teams. I think you look at some of the smaller market U.S. teams as well, might be in a scenario where they don't really feel comfortable going all the way to the cap. We could see some teams that are kind of, have their own internal cap, internal budget, and maybe they don't want to be a maxed out cap team. That's a possibility. It's really likely that we enter this new territory here, maybe not next year, but in the second or third year down the road, as we pass the $100 million mark, that maybe we kind of see tiers. Maybe we have a handful of teams going to the cap, the big markets, your Montreals, Torontos, New Yorks, LAs, the big market, big revenue teams. And then maybe you're going to have some that are going to be, a little bit below, and then you're going to have some that are a fair bit below. Wouldn't be shocking if you kind of seen it divided almost into 33% segments thereabouts. Time will tell. There's, like I said, it's great for the players, but there are, economic concerns with smaller markets as well. There could be other things negotiated into the CBA as well for revenue sharing that could help with that too. So we'll have to see. Clearly, the fact that the NHL and the NHLPA are giving out projection numbers for salary cap for the next couple of years when we don't even have a CBA for those years yet is extremely positive. That's extremely optimistic that it's going to get done smoothly, that we can hopefully avoid a labor dispute and end up having, any stoppages, which is what we as fans do not want, and that we could have, labor peace for an extended period of time. Like I said, that's really positive that they can agree on these things this early, because they're only supposed to start negotiations on the next CBA sometime in February, with the hope and expectation that by the time we hit the Stanley Cup final, that right around that time, they're hoping they'll have the framework in place to be able to announce an extension to the current CBA and maybe some changes. So either way, things are looking very, very positive. Revenue-wise, the league's in good state, and we're going to start to see player salaries climb a fair bit here. Now, as I mentioned, around the rumor mill, lots to talk about. Of course, we've seen some increased activity in the past week with a couple of, we saw the Flames and Flyers trade. We saw the Scott Perunovich trade. We've seen a lot of waiver wire activity, and it's bound to pick up here as we go into Four Nations. You got to remember, as teams come out of Four Nations, they're only going to have, maybe 6-8 games before the trade deadline. Like, you have the Four Nation break smack dab in the middle of February. You come back, you have a couple of games before the end of the month, and then you go into the first week of March, which is where at the end of that week is the trade deadline, right? March 7th, I believe it is. So, it's not a lot of time. So some teams, I think, are looking at things more like the Four Nation break is almost a deadline, if you would, but there is no roster freeze during this Four Nation tournament break. We could see some trades, we could see some activity while that's ongoing. That wouldn't be completely shocking. If anything, teams will have more time, less games going on, that maybe we'll see some activity, and even though there won't be NHL games, we could still have plenty to talk about for news. So we'll have to stay tuned for that. But getting around to some of this news, let's start with Pettersson and Vancouver. Of course, Pettersson and Miller are still getting a lot of airwaves, a lot of attention. But the Calgary-Philadelphia trade has people talking. I know on the Zegras and Price show, which covers the Canucks, had Jeff Merrick on this morning, and they were talking about this, because the Flyers are maybe a team to watch here. Of course, the trade they made with the Flames is basically a cap dump. They trade Joel Farabee and Morgan Frost to the Flames for Kuzmenko and Peltier. But Peltier is making less than $1 million. Kuzmenko is a pending UFA. Kuzmenko may not even be back. He may not even stay. And if he does stay, he's probably signing for a lot less, because he hasn't really lived up to the current contract. So they've suddenly freed up a bunch of money. And plus, we're getting a big increase in the cap next year. So, are the Flyers setting themselves up to be bigger players for a bigger move? It's kind of what they were talking about, and wondering with this team who clearly they're going to be rebuilding, or continuing to rebuild here. They obviously didn't see a future of Farabee and Frost being a part of that. Could they make a swing to be in the Pettersson sweepstakes here, if indeed Vancouver continues to pursue that? Certainly an interesting concept. Of course, there's lots of talk around the Columbus Blue Jackets, around the fact they've had at least some talks. I don't think, based on what we've heard, that things have gotten too serious or too far along. I don't know how motivated the Canucks really are to trade Pettersson. They're playing with fire trading Elias Pettersson, in my opinion. And I would hold off and take my time and make sure you get it right. Trade Miller and see if that makes a difference beforehand. But there's lots. Anyways, the talk is there's lots of teams that are inquiring here, because he is an intriguing player. The Flyers are an interesting one, with suddenly some more space available and a need for centers. So they need what he is, and they have some space even more than before now. So it makes sense. Now, would they have an offer that Vancouver would be interested in? That's going to be the tricky part. Clearly, they wouldn't trade Michkov, but Pettersson and Michkov together could be dynamite. It's hard to say. But what else would the Flyers have? I mean, they do have some other prospects on the way, some other young players within the organization. I don't know exactly what it would cost, but it could be, a case where the Flyers might be kind of positioning themselves for a big move. But like I said, let's not forget about the Blue Jackets. We know that Don Waddell is not afraid to pull off something significant, and from what we've heard, there's definitely interest there, but I don't know. It's hard to say if there's any smoke just yet. When it comes to the Maple Leafs, I know Justin Bourne on Sportsnet was talking about what he sees them doing here by the deadline. He thinks some of their younger pieces are almost guaranteed to be moved, and that the two areas they're definitely looking at is a number 2 center, ideally. If they can't find a number 2 center to fit with the price that they're willing to pay, then maybe it's a number 3 center, or just whoever the best available top 9 forward is, but a center would be the preferred way, because he feels that they've been kind of exposed at their center depth lately in recent games here. Obviously, with Tavares being hurt too, has not helped. So clearly, that's what they're looking for, as well as probably a depth defenseman. So he feels that Nick Robertson is almost guaranteed to be traded, and he'll be used as a trade piece to acquire that forward or that centerman that they're looking for. And he also feels there's a good chance that between Fraser Minton and Easton Cowan, that one of those guys are very likely to be dealt as well. So he feels the Leafs are using a couple of these younger pieces to add a significant veteran piece to try to make their push for the playoffs. Obviously, we've heard about Yanni Gourde, who's now injured. We've heard about Brock Nelson. We've heard about Scott Laughton. I don't think the Flyers really want to move Laughton, so I don't see that happening. Brock Nelson is a possibility, but I think it's more likely that he goes to a U.S. team like Dallas or Minnesota. And with the Islanders, they're unpredictable. Are they not going to make trades now that they've suddenly been on a winning streak? The next couple of weeks for them are going to be significantly different too. In my opinion, they can't let this little win streak really change much. They guys like Palmieri and Nelson need to go, and they need to get back some assets so they can start retooling here, because they need to get some younger pieces in that mix. I would not change gears at all if I'm Lou Lamoriello, but we know that he's an older GM that can be stubborn and sees things a little differently than I think some of us like myself or even younger people. So we'll have to see where things go. But that's the expectation of the Leafs right now. Elliotte Friedman was reporting on his podcast this morning that as he was talking to league executives around the NHL, that one executive told him that he thought that the Avalanche should be targeting Ducks forward Trevor Zegras. Now, Zegras' name has been in and out of the rumor mill. Sometimes when it's in there, it's picking up steam. There's interest, but then lately it seems like he always seems to get hurt, and then that kind of dials things down a bit. But Zegras, he said he felt would be a great player to work with Nathan McKinnon. McKinnon could be a terrific mentor for him. He's a player you can put on the wing. You can put him at center. We know that Middlestat has struggled with that center role. Would Zegras be an upgrade with some of the players he could play with there? It's an interesting concept, because we know after trading Rantanen and bringing in Natchez and Drury that they're probably not done in Colorado. But they may not be able to bring in a super high-end player, and that maybe a player along Zegras' level in income might be more feasible. So it'd be an interesting story to watch for sure. Again, this is something that a league executive told Elliotte Friedman. That doesn't necessarily mean that they've been having conversations, just that some people he's talked to felt it was a good idea and a good fit. The stuff we've been hearing about Brandt Clarke in LA is being downplayed by some local media that cover the Los Angeles Kings, saying that the team is really not interested in trading him, just trying to get him a reset. And obviously, with Drew Doughty's return, it's kind of hurt things a little bit. Some people were talking a bit more because he's expected to be scratched for a second straight game, which is, obviously, after missing 2 in a row, healthy scratch. Before that, your ice time was dwindling. I understand people are calling. According to Friedman, they're getting calls and they're wondering what's going on, and teams are trying to see if they can pry him away, but it doesn't seem like they're super keen on that. And, over time, maybe things change, but for right now, it seems like they're willing to kind of take their time and kind of see where things go before they make any serious long-term moves like that. The other big thing that Elliotte Friedman talked about today on the podcast was the Boston Bruins. He said, maybe a month ago, if you asked if the Bruins were going to be sellers at the deadline, or if you could see pieces like Brad Marchand maybe being moved at the deadline, he would have said probably not. But now, after another recent skid, and now they find themselves on the outside of the playoff picture after wins by the Ottawa Senators and the Columbus Blue Jackets. They're now out of the playoff hunt. And of course, the Bruins have lost the last few games here as well. They're not doing themselves any favors. They had a big win like last week, but then they lost a couple of games, especially after getting blown out by the Buffalo Sabres, which was a game they absolutely had to have. And they don't have a great schedule either. Plus, they've played more games than every team that's around them. They've got, most teams have at least one, if not two games in hand. So like now the Senators, who were has moved in the third spot, now they're ahead of the Bruins by a few points and have 2 games in hand. So that's certainly going to be tough. It doesn't sound like a lot, but you get to the point where you're 4 or 5 points out and you've played a couple of more games, that gets, over a 25 to 30 game range. You think, oh yeah, well, we just got to win 3 more games than our opponents. Well, you know what? You're not only are you doing that, but you're also competing with 2 or 3 other teams that are in that mix as well, trying to move up and down, depending on who plays who. You get 3-point nights with the teams going to overtime and stuff, and it's a lot harder than it looks. So, like I said, originally I would have thought the Bruins wouldn't be sellers, but it's hard to imagine, but we could be there. Like I said, if things don't change over the next week and a half to 2 weeks leading into the Four Nation tournament, we're bound to see a scenario where we might see the Bruins do something drastic and go into retool mode. Trent Frederick is a name that you definitely want to watch and be aware that could be had for sure. But Captain Brad Marchand is going to be very, very interesting. When he's been asked about it to the media, he just said that's beyond his control, and obviously something that management has to do to decide what's best for the team. I do believe Marchand does have some trade protection, though, so it's not like he's going to have no say over where he goes. I know there was originally, when the Avalanche moved Rantanen, there was some speculation right off the bat by some well-connected people saying that maybe one of his Nova Scotia buddies would be joining him. A lot of people thought that was Sidney Crosby, but, I thought about it at first, and I'm like, Crosby and McKinnon, obviously they're better friends, and it would be more fun in a way, but don't rule out Brad Marchand in Boston. He's good friends with both of them. They train a lot together in the summertime, and he's a veteran guy who can play in all situations. They're going to be together at the Four Nation Cup here tournament that's going on here, so they're all going to be talking. Like, some players have control with their contracts, but at the end of the day, it's hard to say. Could Brad Marchand be an Avalanche or another organization after the trade deadline? It's something that, like I said, a little bit earlier in the year, you wouldn't have thought of. But as each day goes by and they start to slip further down the standings, it's getting a little bit closer to being a reality. We haven't really heard much when it comes to contract extensions for him or Frederick, and it's a real possibility that both could be on the block here in the coming weeks. So let me know your thoughts on that and everything else discussed here today. Down in the comments, we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you next time.